Chapter 2775, Astronomical Transaction. Chapter 2775, Astronomical Transaction. Those two? Yu Luo was confused when she followed Shifeng's gaze. After all, there was nobody there. Even when she pushed her perception as a Void Realm expert to the limit, she still couldn't sense any aura or presence of a living being. She didn't notice any unusual fluctuations in space, either. Experts at the Void Realm would be aware of even the slightest disturbances around them. At the end of the day, an assassin's stealth only turned them invisible to the naked eye. They remained physically present in the world. So long as they moved, no matter how slow, they would cause some air turbulence. Such unnatural changes wouldn't escape the perception of a Void Realm expert. Hence, even a Void Realm assassin generally couldn't get within 30 yards of other Void Realm experts undetected. Normally, they could operate only outside the 30-yard radius. As for assassins at the Domain Realm, while they could perform better, they still wouldn't be able to get within 20 yards of Void Realm experts undetected. And even if they did manage this feat, they would be able to maintain it for only a matter of seconds. However, the spot Shifeng was currently looking at was within 20 yards of himself. Moreover, the conversation between Shifeng and Lionheart had lasted more than a few seconds already. Even a Domain Realm expert wouldn't be able to stay hidden for so long. Upon hearing Shifeng's words, Lionheart was slightly surprised. Simultaneously, a hint of alertness and admiration appeared in his eyes. Amazing. As expected of a Tier 4 expert capable of moving between main cities, part of the reason Lionheart had brought Wind Chaser and Crimson Billow with him this time was to test Shifeng's strength. Crimson Billow was ranked second in Skyflare in terms of stealth. Utilizing her advantages as a Domain Realm expert, she had created a unique concealment technique that allowed her to maintain a high degree of stealth despite being in motion. Meanwhile, after combining this technique with a potion that hid one's life aura, let alone Tier 3 Domain Realm experts, even Tier 4 Domain Realm experts wouldn't detect her even when she was within 20 yards of them. Of course, Tier 4 Domain Realm experts would definitely detect her once she got within 16 yards of them. Even so, being able to conceal herself to such an extent was already more than enough for her to rank at the top of Meteorite City and instill fear into Tier 4 experts. Wind Chaser was even more powerful. After reaching Tier 4, his stealth skill was no longer limited to just turning his physical body invisible and concealing his life aura. Instead, the skill would place his body in a shadow space. No matter what he did inside this space, it wouldn't affect the outside world. Naturally, others wouldn't be able to detect his movements while he was inside this shadow space. In fact, despite knowing about Wind Chaser's ability, Lionheart hadn't realized that Wind Chaser was already standing within 20 yards of him. Nevertheless, Shifeng had stated that there were two people behind Lionheart. This meant that he had detected both Crimson Billow and Wind Chaser. Chaser, Billow, you two can show yourselves now, Lionheart said, smiling as he looked at the empty space Shifeng indicated. No need to hide anymore. As soon as Lionheart finished speaking, two figures gradually appeared in that empty space. They were none other than Wind Chaser and Crimson Billow. The two assassins were looking at Shifeng with eyes brimming with surprise and confusion. Commander, did I show some irregularities just now? Crimson Billow quietly asked Lionheart through the team chat. Afraid that she would get detected, she had deliberately maintained a 21-yard distance between herself and Shifeng. After all, she hardly knew anything about Shifeng, apart from the fact that he was a Tier 4 expert, and she didn't wish to ruin Lionheart's attempt at probing Shifeng's strength. Yet, despite the 21-yard distance, he still detected her. Excluding Lionheart, this was the first time a Tier 4 individual perceived her from beyond 20 yards. You didn't. It's just that this person is much stronger than we thought, Lionheart responded, shaking his head. Don't act rashly against him afterward. Shifeng had discovered not only Crimson Billow but also Wind Chaser. While defeating a Tier 4 expert like Shifeng would be simple for the current Skyflare, killing him would be incredibly difficult. Unless absolutely necessary, they had best not offend this Sword Emperor. In response, both Crimson Billow and Wind Chaser nodded silently. The trio had conversed for only 2 or 3 seconds, so outsiders did not find anything wrong with the situation. They merely saw Wind Chaser and Crimson Billow approaching Lionheart slowly after making their appearance. When Yu Luo, who stood beside Shifeng, saw the two assassins walking over, her eyes widened in shock. There really are two people. Despite the two assassins being so close to her, she actually failed to notice either of them. This overturned her understanding of the assassin class. Meanwhile, when Shifeng saw the two assassins, a hint of wariness also appeared in his eyes. The two assassins were astonishingly strong. This was especially true for Wind Chaser. If not for the recent breakthrough Shifeng achieved with his mana body, which granted him a physique and perception far superior to ordinary Tier 4 individuals, he would have most likely failed to notice Wind Chaser's presence. If Wind Chaser really were intent on targeting a specific player, it would be a nightmare for the said player. After all, the Tier 4 assassin was capable of suddenly appearing within 20 yards of his target without giving off any indications a distance that any Tier 4 combatant could cross in the blink of an eye. If Shifeng was not careful, even he might end up falling prey to Wind Chaser's ambush. Let's head to a reception room to continue our conversation, Lionheart suggested to Shifeng Shaw. Shifeng did not object to the proposal. His original goal in coming to the ancient god's domain was to acquire a large amount of resources. Meanwhile, the best way to do so was by partnering with a local tyrant. He could gather resources much faster this way than if he did it by himself. In fact, he could even gain access to items that normally wouldn't appear on the market. Lionheart's taking the initiative to seek him out was naturally good news for Shifeng. Lionheart led Shifeng and Yu Luo to the top-floor reception room he had reserved beforehand. Commander Lionheart. After taking his seat, Shifeng went straight to the point, saying, "Please just say what you have to say. There is no need for us to waste both our time by playing around with words. You really are a straightforward person, Brother Black Flame." Lionheart smiled at Shifeng's words. "I was thinking the same thing. In that case, I'll be blunt with you. Skyflare wishes to purchase all of the crystals of souls and soul water you are selling. It seems you are very ambitious, Commander Lionheart. You actually plan to monopolize Meteorite City." Shifeng didn't feel particularly surprised at Lionheart's declaration. Calmly, he said, "Of course, we can go with such an arrangement as well. Only, I have quite a number of these items, and I'm afraid your adventurer team can't swallow them all." As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, Wind Chaser, who stood behind Lionheart, laughed. "What a joke. There is nothing in Meteorite City that our adventurer team cannot swallow." Looking at Shifeng, Wind Chaser sneered, "Of course, that is under the premise that your price is fair." At Wind Chaser's provocation, Shifeng simply shook his head and smiled. "Truthfully, even at 150,000 magic crystals per crystal of souls, you won't be able to afford everything. Not to mention, there is still the soul water." He had a total of 43 crystals of souls. If he sold each for 150,000 magic crystals, that would equate to 6.45 million magic crystals. Even though the ancient god's domain was rich in resources, a player force with a sphere of activity limited to just one city couldn't take out such an amount. At Shifeng's words, Wind Chaser, who initially planned to probe Shifeng further, fell silent. There was no way a Tier 4 expert like Shifeng wouldn't know about the Skyflare adventurer team's status and general wealth in Meteorite City. For Shifeng to say such words meant he had absolute confidence backing him. Meanwhile, after hearing Shifeng's response, both Yu Luo and Crimson Billow couldn't help gasping. They never thought that Shifeng would actually be so wealthy. They had already investigated the Crystal of Souls, so they knew it was a precious treasure that wasn't obtained easily. Yet, Shifeng had just declared that Skyflare couldn't afford to purchase all his stock. This proved that Shifeng had a lot of crystals of souls on hand. Who knew how many Tier 4 experts one could create with so many crystals of souls? "You truly are extraordinary, Brother Black Flame." Lionheart immediately broke into a smile. Moreover, this was a very sincere smile. "I apologize to you on behalf of my brother. At the same time, I also hope that the Skyflare adventurer team can form a long-term partnership with you. What do you think? I admit that Skyflare cannot take out the necessary magic crystals to purchase all your crystals of souls. However, Our adventurer team still ranks within the top 3 of Meteorite City's player forces in daily income. We might not be able to swallow everything in one bite, but I'm sure we can do so after several or a dozen bites. Furthermore, I can assure you that not only will we purchase each crystal of souls for 200,000 magic crystals, but we will also ensure a weekly transaction of 3 million magic crystals at a minimum. May I know what you think of this, Brother Black Flame? Yu Luo gaped in shock at Lionheart's words despite herself. She never imagined that the Skyflare adventurer team had such astonishing wealth. Even the superpowers in the modern god's domain were far from comparable to Skyflare in magic crystal acquisition. Moreover, Lionheart even raised the price of the Crystal of Souls to 200,000 magic crystals. Skyflare was probably the only power in Meteorite City capable of offering such a price. After all, a piece of fragmented legendary equipment cost only around 500,000 magic crystals, while fragmented legendary weapons cost around 1 million magic crystals. Lionheart's promise of a weekly transaction of 3 million magic crystals meant Skyflare was trading away 3 fragmented legendary weapons every week. Commander. At this time, even Wind Chaser was stunned by Lionheart's offer. The Skyflare adventurer team operated only in Meteorite City's vicinity, and there were only so many resources available in the area. If Skyflare really pushed through with this transaction, the adventurer team would have to tighten its belt and strictly limit its future expenditures. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. OK, I can agree to those conditions, Shifeng said, nodding. After giving the matter some thought, he felt that this price was probably the best he could get for the Crystals of Souls. Even if he could get a higher price at an auction, it wouldn't be much higher. However, before this, I wish to test you, Commander Lionheart. We can verify our transaction depending on your performance. What do you think? Test our commander? Shifeng's words infuriated Wind Chaser. Crimson Billow's complexion also darkened, a hint of hostility appearing in her eyes as she looked at Shifeng. Even super guilds would not dare say that they wished to test their commander's qualifications for cooperation, yet a person of unknown origin actually did so. Shifeng was utterly looking down on the Skyflare adventurer team. However, before Wind Chaser or Crimson Billow could say anything else, Lionheart extended a hand to stop them. He then looked at Shifeng with a glint of determination in his eyes as he asked, "May I know how you wish to conduct your test, Brother Black Flame?" "Simple. So long as you survive a hit from me, you'll pass," Shifeng said decisively. Chapter 2776. Duel between Sword and Shield. Chapter 2776. Duel between Sword and Shield. Survive a hit from you? Lionheart was momentarily stunned by Shifeng's words. Even Wind Chaser and Crimson Billow fell into a daze for a long time. They felt that Shifeng was simply toying with the Skyflare adventurer team. Looking at Shifeng, Wind Chaser asked to verify, "Are you sure this is your condition? Do you know what title our commander holds in Meteorite City?" Initially, Wind Chaser thought that Shifeng would make things difficult for them to invalidate this transaction. Yet, Shifeng's condition for partnership was simply for Lionheart to survive a hit from him. This test was beyond simple. Let alone Tier 4 players, even superior mythic monsters were incapable of one-shotting Lionheart. The Skyflare adventurer team had relied precisely on Lionheart's overwhelming defense to develop to its current extent. It would be a complete and utter joke to say that a Tier 4 player could one-shot Lionheart. For a moment, Wind Chaser even suspected that Shifeng had never bothered looking into Lionheart's information. Either that or the man thought that Lionheart's fame was exaggerated. "Of course. I'm very certain." Shifeng nodded earnestly. Yu Luo also couldn't help looking at Shifeng strangely. She simply couldn't understand why Shifeng would set such a meaningless condition. She knew that Shifeng was indeed very strong. This was evident from how he repelled over a dozen Tier 3 demon leaders with one move. However, Lionheart wasn't a pushover, either. The achievements he had today were piled up through innumerable battles. Wind Chaser and Crimson Billow turned to Lionheart. Although they didn't know what Lionheart thought of this matter, Shifeng's test presented no problem to them. It wouldn't even be an exaggeration to call it a free pass. Meanwhile, so long as their two sides entered into a partnership, the Skyflare Adventurer team would be able to gain full control over Meteorite City easily. In fact, it wouldn't be long before they could start establishing branches in other NPC main cities. And even if the player forces of the other cities opposed Skyflare's intrusion, they would have difficulty doing so. After all, what truly mattered in a fight between powers were Tier 4 combatants. Although the saying one Tier 4 player could easily go up against a countless number of Tier 3 players was indeed exaggerated, it was still a fact that Tier 4 players could do many things that Tier 3 players couldn't. This was the difference between tiers and life ratings. No problem. I agree to your condition, Lionheart said. After giving the matter some thought, he couldn't find any problems with Shifeng's condition. However, are we going to hold the test here? In Lionheart's opinion, Shifeng probably wasn't aware of the strength of his Blood Knight class. As one of the incredibly rare ancient legacies in God's domain, the skills it offered were far superior to ordinary peak legacies. Not to mention, he currently had 3 fragmented legendary items on him: the Bulwark of Holy Blood, the Void Magic Armor, and the Windwall Ring. Even when he had only the fragmented legendary shield and armor, he could already fend off superior mythic monsters. In fact, if not for the high HP and defense of superior mythic monsters, he could even solo these monsters, given enough time. Now that he had the Windwall Ring, his defensive capabilities had soared even further. I'm afraid this place isn't sufficient. We'll need to rent an advanced combat room, Shifeng said, shaking his head. In that case, let's go to our adventurer team's Skyflare Hotel. There's a special combat room there. It should be enough for us to display our strengths, Lionheart suggested. A special combat room? Shifeng was surprised at Lionheart's words. He never thought that special combat rooms already existed in the ancient god's domain. Special combat rooms were far superior to advanced combat rooms. They were perfect for practicing skill and spell usage. However, special combat rooms simply weren't something that could be acquired at this stage of the game. Let's go to the Skyflare Hotel, then. Shifeng and Yu Luo followed Lionheart's group to the Skyflare Hotel, which was only 1 block away from the auction house. The instant the group walked into the Skyflare Hotel, Yu Luo grew a little excited. The Skyflare Hotel wasn't a place just anyone could enter and rest at. Aside from Skyflare's members and the members of partnered powers, who received a 50% discount, visitors would be charged the full price when staying at the hotel. Meanwhile, even the most basic room here cost 400 magic crystals per day. Even a Tier 3 Void Realm expert like herself wouldn't dare stay here for no good reason. Only when she needed to verify some theories and techniques she thought of would she make an exception and stay here. As for Shifeng, he felt as if he had just walked into a sacred training ground. The density of the mana here was truly amazing, much more than even in Stone Forest City's Freedom Hotel. In fact, the boost he got for his perception of magic elements was roughly 20% higher than what he got from the hotel he was currently staying at. No wonder he's so confident of being able to take out 3 million magic crystals per week. At this time, Shifeng finally understood why Lionheart was so confident in the Skyflare Adventurer team's abilities. Meanwhile, along with Shifeng and Yu Luo's arrival, an uproar occurred among Skyflare's executives. I heard that guy named Black Flame wants to test the commander. What? That guy must be crazy. He thinks the commander is someone he can test. Even if the commander just stands there and does nothing, he won't be able to injure the commander in the slightest. It's not a standard PvP, though. He only wants the commander to take a hit from him. It seems this person is trying to show his strength to our adventurer team. He must be worried that he can't beat the commander, so he came up with that kind of condition. At that time, even if he fails to injure the commander, he could still salvage his reputation somewhat. When Skyflare's several dozen executives looked at Shifeng, who had already entered the special combat room, they promptly conducted hushed discussions among themselves. They all felt that Shifeng was pulling such a stunt because he wished to gain respect yet was also worried about making a fool of himself. However, in their opinion, Shifeng's actions were pointless. After all, when Lionheart dueled against other players, he almost never used his full strength to achieve victory. Even Wind Chaser, who had reached Tier 4 as well, had been almost helpless against Meteorite's wall. And although Windchaser had eventually emerged victorious in his duel against Lionheart, he had done so by dragging out the fight and chipping away at Lionheart's HP. Not to mention, this was in a situation where Lionheart had not gone all out. Otherwise, even Windchaser shouldn't think of harming Lionheart in the slightest. Shortly afterward, all of Skyflare's executives packed the special combat room spectator stands. Some executives had even abandoned their quests to spectate this duel. Lionheart had never fought in a duel since Windchaser had gotten promoted to Tier 4. During this period, Lionheart had improved significantly. Not only did he gain a new Tier 4 legacy skill, but he had also obtained the fragmented legendary ranked Windwall ring, a defense-oriented ring. At this point, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that their commander's strength had already surpassed their imagination. While Skyflare's executives were eagerly waiting for the duel to begin, Shifeng and Lionheart were standing in the middle of the room's spacious battlefield. At this point, both fighters had already adjusted their conditions and were ready to take action at any time. "I'm ready. You can make your move whenever you want," Lionheart said as he raised his shield and longsword. From the crimson runes decorating the shield and longsword, it was evident the two were a set. Only, the mana gathered around the weapon was slightly inferior in quality compared to what was around the bulwark of the Holy Blood. At this time, Lionheart stopped concealing his statistics. Immediately, his HP of 16.6 million appeared for everyone to see, flaunting the high HP of a Tier 4 defensive class. It was evident that Lionheart planned to let Shifeng see his own strength. "He has 16.6 million HP? How is this possible?" Yu Luo gasped reflexively when she saw Lionheart's HP. As a defensive class player, Lionheart already possessed incredibly high defense, to begin with. Combined with his various defensive skills and HP, he was practically a boss monster. Yu Luo even doubted that Shifeng could one-shot Lionheart even if the latter did not defend himself. In fact, it would already be a miracle if Shifeng could remove 1/3 of Lionheart's HP in one hit. Amazing. Level 130 Tier 3 defensive classes usually have only 9 million HP on average, yet you have almost twice that, Shifeng said in admiration. "It's nothing. It's only because of my unique legacy." Lionheart didn't pay particular attention to Shifeng's words of appreciation. On the contrary, he wanted to use this opportunity to let Shifeng realize the Skyflare adventurer team's might. After all, Skyflare had already lost once to Shifeng before. He needed to reclaim this loss and level the playing field. "Since you're ready, I'll begin." Shifeng naturally understood what was going through Lionheart's mind. Unfortunately, Lionheart simply wasn't aware of Shifeng's aim. "Come." Lionheart readied his shield, a serious expression appearing on his face. Immediately afterward, not only did Lionheart's aura skyrocket in intensity, but a faint, blood-red barrier had also appeared around his body. "Crap. The commander is getting serious. He's actually going all out and fully exerting his mana body right off the bat," one of Skyflare's vice-commanders, a robust, level 132 shield warrior, said in astonishment. Blood armor. This was the Tier 4 legacy skill Lionheart obtained after achieving a 100% completion rate with his mana body. Although the magic barrier appeared flimsy, it could absorb up to 5 million damage. Moreover, the barrier would replenish itself once every 40 seconds. In other words, if one failed to cause over 5 million damage to Lionheart within 40 seconds, one had no chance of slaying him. Had Lionheart used this move during his duel with Windchaser back then, Windchaser wouldn't have been able to harm him at all. However, before Skyflare's members were done admiring their commander's Tier 4 passive skill, they saw Shifeng unsheath the abyssal blade. Immediately afterward, everyone clearly sensed the mana in the room trembling and freezing momentarily. Before anyone could react to the unexpected development, Shifeng raised the abyssal blade with both hands and looked at Lionheart. The mana inside the special combat room then began to boil, the phenomenon causing everyone present to shudder involuntarily. Afterward, everyone felt a wave of scorching heat wash over their body. How is this possible? When Windchaser sensed the mana around him boiling, he was stunned. After all, the space inside the special combat room was massive, with a 1,000-yard radius. That was more than enough for two Tier 4 players to fight to their heart's content. Nevertheless, Shifeng caused all of the mana inside the combat room to boil just by entering a stance. This kind of thing was simply unheard of. At this time, Lionheart's gaze also changed. If entering a stance was enough to trigger such a phenomenon, Shifeng's strength was definitely far more extraordinary than he initially thought. However, before Lionheart could take any further action, the flow of time inside the combat room seemed to slow down. The only thing capable of moving was apparently the sword in Shifeng's hands. Second sword, Holy Devour. As the long sword descended, an overwhelming pressure fell upon the room. Afterward, space within the room ignited, as if it couldn't withstand the terrifying and violent pressure. The resulting flames threatened to burn everything in the room into nothing. Not good. Holy Blood Wall. Four Saints Descent. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Upon seeing the boundless flames approaching him, Lionheart hurriedly activated the defensive skill Holy Blood Wall, then stabbed his shield into the ground and activated his strongest Tier 4 defensive legacy skill. The next moment, a twofold magic array appeared before the bulwark of Holy Blood, which was followed by an illusory crimson shield that was over a dozen meters tall. Crimson runes flared all over Lionheart's body, solidifying the surrounding space until it was as sturdy as a steel wall. Meanwhile, the instant Lionheart used Four Saints' Descent, the endless sea of flames devoured him like a giant beast. Boom! Accompanied by a thunderous explosion, the space within the special combat room transformed into a dark, empty void. Chapter 2777, Shocking Skyflare. Chapter 2777, Shocking Skyflare. A dark void enveloped the battlefield. Let alone Tier 3 players, even Tier 4 players couldn't survive in this space. Meanwhile, when Skyflare's executives, seated in the spectator stands, saw this scene, they were dumbfounded. How can one carry such destructive power? Even those Tier 4 NPCs aren't capable of exhibiting such power. Is he really just a Tier 4 player? He has such terrifying strength, yet we actually failed to find any information on him. Just who is he? After a moment of silence, Skyflare's executives began a heated discussion among themselves as they goggled at the battlefield's shattered space. At this time, they no longer underestimated Shifeng in the slightest. Now, only shock and fear filled their hearts. With such terrifying combat power, Shifeng was no longer an opponent vulnerable to Zerg tactics. Only powerful Tier 4 NPCs could match him. He was actually so strong. Tarzu Luo's eyes were also wide with disbelief as she looked at the shattered space. Even Angelica Teresa's strongest attack would fall short of Shifeng's from what she could tell. Angelica Teresa was a peak-rank Tier 4 existence and one of the top 5 powerhouses of Meteorite City. In addition, as an NPC, the items and basic attributes she possessed were also far superior to players. Yet, Shifeng had actually executed an attack way stronger than even Angelica Teresa's strongest attack. Commander. The commander couldn't have fallen, right? After a while, Windchaser and the others snapped out of their daze and searched hurriedly for Lionheart's figure in the dark void. Out of the player attacks they had seen thus far, Shifeng's was undoubtedly the strongest. Even Tier 4 NPCs were unlikely to be capable of executing such an attack. Hence, although they knew that Lionheart possessed a heaven-defying defense, they couldn't help doubting his ability to survive Shifeng's attack. After everyone had searched for some time, the shattered space gradually recovered. Two vague figures appeared, standing in the recovering space, with one of them looking incredibly miserable. This is great. The commander is still alive. I knew the commander could withstand it. He is Meteorite's wall, after all. There's no way he can be one-shotted by a player. When Skyflare's members saw Lionheart's figure, they immediately grew excited. However, unlike his colleagues, Lionheart did not feel happy or excited at all. Instead, his heart pounded with fear and relief. That was too close. If not for the Windwall ring, I would have definitely been one-shotted. Lionheart smiled bitterly when he looked at his remaining HP. Currently, he had less than 6 million HP remaining. While this might seem like a lot, he had only managed to retain this amount of HP thanks to the Windwall ring's passive skill. The Windwall Ring's passive skill, Wind's Protection, was capable of reducing all the damage he received by 35%. Even if he received a Tier 5 attack, its damage would still be reduced by a full 35%. Wind's Protection was also the Windwall Ring's only skill. The Windwall Ring was different from other equipment with passive damage reduction skills. Although the alternatives might even have skills offering much greater reductions than Wind's Protection on paper, there were hidden limits to these skills. Generally, their upper limit was Tier 4. Once an attack reached the Tier 4 standard, their effect would be significantly weaker. And against Tier 5 attacks, their effect was practically negligible. However, that was not the case for the Windwall Ring's Wind's Protection. The skill's description clearly stated that it could reduce the damage of even Tier 5 attacks by 35% and not 1% less. On the other side, after Shifeng executed Holy Devour, his complexion had paled significantly. Is it still too much to execute this move? When Shifeng sensed that more than half of his concentration had disappeared, he was shocked. He had already developed his epic mana body to 110% completion rate, yet he still had trouble gathering and condensing the mana required to execute Holy Devour. For a moment, he couldn't help imagining what kind of power he could exhibit if he successfully executed the third sword, Holy Annihilation. Tier 5. Tier 6. Regardless, this is a good result. At the very least, I can now use the complete Holy Devour. Now, I should be able to cope, even against a half-step Demon King. As Shifeng sheathed the Abyssal Blade, he was satisfied with his previous attack. Although his mana had undergone a qualitative transformation, thanks to the improvement of his mana body, the improvement this change brought to his skills and spells was limited. It wasn't enough for them to undergo a qualitative transformation. However, it was a different story for mana techniques, whose power was highly dependent on the quality of the mana used. Now, if he went all out, he could execute an attack at the Tier 5 standard. The only drawback of Holy Devour was the huge burden it placed on his concentration. Even at peak condition, he could execute the complete Holy Devour only once. Nevertheless, it was already more than enough as a trump card. As Shifeng was savoring the experience of executing Holy Devour, Lionheart approached him. "Brother Black Flame, that move of yours really is ruthless. If I hadn't gained some improvements recently, I would have really died," Lionheart said jocularly. At this moment, Lionheart no longer underestimated or looked at Shifeng with contempt, only respect was present in his eyes. The fact that Shifeng had managed to execute such a move as a player meant that he already stood at the apex of the entire God's domain. Just this point alone was already more than enough to earn him everyone's respect. In God's domain, strength was everything. It was also something that could not be faked. For Shifeng to have developed himself to this extent, he must have experienced countless trials and hardships. "You're too humble, Commander Lionheart. The fact that you managed to block my attack is all due to your own ability, not luck." Looking at Lionheart, Shifeng added, "Now that our one-hit agreement is complete, according to our previous arrangement, I will supply the crystals of souls and soul water to only the Skyflare Adventurer team for Meteorite City's side. Thank you. As for the matter of magic crystals, please rest assured. The Skyflare Adventurer team definitely won't let you down, Brother Black Flame." Lionheart couldn't help feeling a little happy at Shifeng's words. With Shifeng willing to partner with Skyflare, Skyflare would be able to take full control of Meteorite City easily. Next, let's talk about the specifics of our transaction. Going straight to the point, Shifeng said, "Like I said before, so long as you manage to withstand one hit from me, I will agree to partner with you, Commander Lionheart. However, after we start our cooperation, I'll need your help with something. Of course, I won't have you help me for nothing. In exchange, I'll sell the crystals of souls at 150,000 magic crystals each to Skyflare. How about it? 150,000 each." Lionheart was slightly tempted. "May I know what you need help with?" Previously, when he offered to purchase the crystals of souls at 200,000 magic crystals each, the price was actually a little too high for Skyflare to bear. However, the crystals of souls were far too important. They would also play a crucial role when Skyflare attempted to conquer other main cities. Hence, He had gone through with the price. Lowering the price to 150,000 magic crystals each would definitely alleviate a lot of Skyflare's burden. "Help me kill a boss," Shifeng said, smiling. The reason Shifeng wanted to test Lionheart wasn't just to experiment with the power of his upgraded mana body. He had also wished to see whether Lionheart could withstand the attack of a Tier 4 infant dragon. After all, if he didn't have anyone capable of tanking a hit from a Tier 4 infant dragon, slaying it would be utterly impossible. Since Lionheart clearly met this requirement, combined with the effects of the Heavenly Dragon's breath, challenging an unrestrained Tier 4 infant dragon was entirely feasible. Kill a boss. Lionheart was a little puzzled. He never thought Shifeng's request would be so simple. "Is this boss very strong?" "Very strong." Not bothering to hide the truth, Shifeng said, "It's a Tier 4 infant dragon." "A Tier 4 infant dragon?" Lionheart gasped at Shifeng's words. Immediately, he thought of something and asked, "Are you referring to the one Lady Angelica is trying to challenge?" "That's right. It's that one." Shifeng nodded. "Actually, this matter is also beneficial to you as well, Commander Lionheart. After all, Meteorite City's promotion will attract more players and resources to the city. At that time, Skyflare can grow stronger together with the city." Lionheart nodded in agreement. In reality, he, too, wished for Meteorite City to grow stronger and become an advanced main city. However, the incredibly high difficulty of challenging a Tier 4 infant dragon made him decide to have Skyflare opt out of Angelica Teresa's expedition. After all, Skyflare already had 2 Tier 4 players under its command, and it had yet to stabilize its advantages. If Skyflare eagerly participated in the risky expedition and failed, the adventurer team would definitely lose a lot of its advantages. "What do you think, Commander Lionheart?" Shifeng asked. Previously, he didn't hold much hope for slaying the Tier 4 infant dragon. After all, a Tier 4 infant dragon was comparable to Tier 5 existences. It was much stronger than even a demon prince. Even though he could use the complete Holy Devour now, it wouldn't make any difference since he couldn't use the technique indefinitely. However, the story would change if Lionheart was present. The fact that Lionheart could survive a Tier 5 attack meant that he could defend against a Tier 4 infant dragon's attack. "Okay." After thinking for a while, Lionheart gritted his teeth and agreed to Shifeng's condition. "However, Brother Black Flame, as Skyflare has just gained some advantages, we cannot afford to invest everything into helping you. We can send only a 100-man team, at most." In response to Lionheart's worries, Shifeng simply chuckled and said, "That's already more than enough. In fact, it's fine so long as Skyflare can dispatch its 2 Tier 4 players, let alone a 100-man team." "May I know when we will begin the operation?" Lionheart asked. Raiding a Tier 4 infant dragon was an important matter. Preparing the necessary manpower and supplies would take a lot of time. "We're not in a rush right now. I'm afraid it will still take several days before we can set out," Shifeng said, shaking his head. "I'll notify you when the time comes, Commander Lionheart." Challenging a Tier 4 infant dragon with just 3 Tier 4 players would be outright suicide. It wouldn't matter even if they had a large number of Tier 3 players supporting them. Fortunately, the ancient god's domain did not require players to search for their legacy lands to challenge their Tier 4 promotion quests. So long as he had Lifeless Thorn and the others challenge their promotion quests and some of them succeeded, he would have a much greater chance of success. "All right. If that's the case, I can make more preparations on my side." Lionheart breathed out a sigh of relief at Shifeng's words. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Afterward, Shifeng signed a partnership contract with Lionheart to the effect that Skyflare would purchase crystals of souls from Shifeng at 150,000 magic crystals per crystal and soul water at 30,000 magic crystals per drop. For the first transaction, Skyflare purchased a total of 20 crystals of souls and 50 drops of soul water, the total expenditure amounting to 4.5 million magic crystals. When it came to magic crystals, Skyflare was wealthier than most superpowers operating in the modern god's domain. When the transaction was completed, Shifeng couldn't help his elation. After all, he now had the 8 million magic crystals required to construct the small mobile fortress. Afterward, All he needed to do was collect 2 million pieces of mana ore and 30,000 mana stones. In addition, he also had a chance to raid the Tier 4 infant dragon. Leaving the Skyflare Hotel, Shifeng looked at the additional 4.5 million magic crystals in his bag and smiled. Now that I have the money, it's about time to have Lifeless Thorn and the others undergo their promotion. Chapter 2778, Semi-Finished Mana Body. Chapter 2778, Semi-Finished Mana Body. Meteorite City, Silver Hotel. After Shifeng received 4.5 million magic crystals from Skyflare, he returned to the Silver Hotel with Yu Luo. As for the small auction he initially planned to hold, Lionheart had announced to the public that Skyflare would monopolize all of the products. Hence, the commotion over the auction died down quickly. None of Meteorite City's various powers dared to voice their opinions on Skyflare's monopoly. After all, Skyflare was the sole power in the city with 2 Tier 4 combatants under its command. Previously, the powers with Tier 4 combatants still dared to stand up against Skyflare because Lionheart could not easily kill other Tier 4 combatants by himself. However, now that Skyflare's Wind Chaser was a Tier 4 assassin, it would be a piece of cake for Skyflare to kill any individual Tier 4 combatant. Hence, even the other 2 of the top 3 player forces in Meteorite City decided to tolerate the situation. Not to mention, while the Crystal of Souls could indeed strengthen an individual's soul, the amount of help this improvement could provide in the Tier 4 promotion quest was minuscule. Even if Skyflare obtained all 5 Crystals of Souls, the adventurer team would, at most, increase the number of Tier 4 combatants it had from 2 to 3. Meanwhile, back in his room, Shifeng promptly took out 75,000 magic crystals and distributed them to Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, Yang Ya, Cleansing Whistle, and Yu Luo. Right, each of you take a drop of soul water as well, Shifeng said as he took out 5 drops of soul water and distributed them. Once you are done collecting the legacy fragments, drink it immediately. Although it isn't as effective as the Crystal of Souls, it can still clear your mind. You should have an easier time learning your legacy skill. In response, Lifeless Thorn and the other Azura members nodded and accepted the soul water. Yu Luo, however, hesitated. She didn't know whether she should accept the soul water, which cost 30,000 magic crystals a drop. Guild leader Black Flame, this soul water is too valuable. I already feel very indebted to you just for letting me challenge my Tier 4 promotion quest this time. I really cannot accept this soul water, Yu Luo said, rejecting Shifeng's gift after giving the matter some thought. Heaven's Blade had cooperated with Zero Wing only once. The 2 organizations couldn't even be considered allies. If she accepted this soul water, she would owe Shifeng a huge favor. In that case, she would have a difficult time explaining herself to Zui once she returned. However, in response to Yu Luo's rejection, Shifeng shook his head and said, Miss Yu Luo, you must have misunderstood me. I'm not giving you this soul water for free. I need you to help me with something in the near future. If you reach Tier 4, we'll have a higher chance of success. Help you with something? Yu Luo was a little dazed. That's right. I plan to raid that Tier 4 infant dragon. However, Tier 3 players are useless against an infant dragon. Only Tier 4 players will matter. Meanwhile, as you've reached the Void Realm already, your control over mana should be excellent. Your concentration should also be only 1 step away from reaching the Tier 4 standard. With the Soul Water's help, you'll have a better chance of promoting to Tier 4, Shifeng said, nodding. Hence, this Soul Water is my investment in you. I'm not giving it to you for free, so you don't need to overthink things. The upcoming raid of the Tier 4 infant dragon wasn't something Tier 3 players could stick their hands into. Only Tier 4 players could be of help. A Tier 4 healer would be especially useful. Since Shifeng couldn't guarantee that Yang Ya would succeed in her Tier 4 promotion quest, having a backup plan would naturally be better. Not to mention, he currently had over 2,000 drops of soul water on hand. He could still afford such a small investment. I understand. If I don't get promoted to Tier 4 this time, I will find a way to pay you back for this soul water, Yu Luo said. With Shifeng's words, the burden she felt lightened considerably. Truthfully, she would be lying if she said that she did not want the soul water. After all, the Tier 4 promotion quest was no walk in the park. Meteorite City's peak experts demonstrated this point quite well. Among all the peak experts who had challenged their Tier 4 promotion quest, less than 10% succeeded. Not to mention, she was slightly weaker than them. However, if she had the soul water's mind-cleansing effect, she would most likely be able to stand on equal footing with the local peak experts. Yu Luo accepted the soul water, a glint of determination appearing in her eyes. This was because this drop of soul water represented not just hope but also a burden. If she completed her Tier 4 promotion quest, then she would be able to repay all of the favors she owed right away. After all, Tier 4 great clerics were incredibly rare even in the ancient gods' domain, let alone the modern gods' domain. You guys can go now. Whether you can get promoted or not will all depend on yourselves now, Shifeng said after Yu Luo accepted the soul water. He then instructed the group of 5, remember, act according to your strengths when choosing your respective Tier 4 skills. There is no need to learn the strongest one. Instead, learn the one you're most proficient at. He did not doubt the ability of the 5 people before him to collect the necessary number of legacy fragments. His only worry was their ability to learn a Tier 4 legacy skill within the allotted time. Afterward, under Yu Luo's lead, Lifeless Thorn and the others departed for Meteorite City's Tier 4 instructors. Now, only Shifeng remained inside the hotel room. Let's hope a few of them can reach Tier 4. If that's the case, we'll have an easier time dealing with that infant dragon. Looking at the group of 5's departing figures, Shifeng inwardly celebrated the fact that he managed to get through his Tier 4 promotion quest previously. Immediately afterward, he sensed the state of his mana body and smiled. It's about time I grinded for some levels. If I don't get used to this mana body, I might cause the quest to fail. After unlocking his mana body to a 110% completion rate, he had not had an opportunity to get used to it properly. His duel with Lionheart didn't prove anything. After all, mana bodies provided all-around improvements to players. There was no way he could determine all of these improvements just by putting all his strength into one attack. In fact, he couldn't even tell if his overall combat power had improved or not through his duel with Lionheart. This was because the mana body's improvement mainly led to subtle improvements in various aspects. On the surface, it was impossible to tell if his improved mana body had brought any changes to his overall combat power. After all, his basic attributes remained the same as before. Right now, the only obvious improvements were in the density of his mana, his control over mana, his physique, and his 5 senses. During his fight with Lionheart, he had only proven that the improvement of his mana body had positive effects on his mana techniques. Even then, he still wasn't clear how the improvement had triggered such a change. Needless to say, he was even more clueless about the other benefits his improved mana body had to offer. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. If he wished to fully utilize his new mana body and maximize his combat power, he would need to readapt to his mana body. It was akin to learning a new skill or spell. He would need to put in a lot of time and effort into adapting and training. Only after he could make use of his mana body at an instinctive level could he be considered to have truly adapted to it. At this point, his mana body could only be considered a semi-finished product. Next, he would have to explore his mana body thoroughly. Shifeng drank a drop of soul water, recovering some of the concentration he had expended executing Holy Devour. He then put on his black cloak and silently departed from Meteorite City. After taking a look at the system map, he took to the skies and made his way toward the Antimagic Volcano, a level 135 neutral map located a distance from Meteorite City. From start to end, nobody in Meteorite City was aware that he had left the city. Chapter 2779, Astonishing Improvements. Chapter 2779, Astonishing Improvements. According to Shifeng's understanding, few players and NPCs from Meteorite City and other nearby cities were willing to come to the Antimagic Volcano to grind and explore. Several factors contributed to this situation. Firstly, the thin mana environment here prevented players and NPCs from exhibiting the power of their skills and spells to their fullest extent. This, in turn, would put players and NPCs at a severe disadvantage against monsters. Secondly, what little mana there was in the antimagic volcano was incredibly chaotic, which made it nigh impossible to control. Hence, doing combat here would not allow one to improve their control over mana. Thirdly, and most importantly, the monsters inhabiting the antimagic volcano consisted solely of fire-type elemental creatures and beasts. These monsters had a combat power a lot higher than the average monsters. In addition, they existed in large numbers in the antimagic volcano. Even a 1,000-man team of Tier 3 players would have difficulty staying alive in this map, let alone grinding for EXP. However, unlike other players, Shifeng considered this neutral map the perfect leveling spot for him. This place really is amazing. There are actually so many great lords and grand lords here. As Shifeng looked down at the wandering monsters while hovering in midair, he couldn't help a little excitement. With this, I won't have to worry about not having enough crystals of souls. Volcanic Behemoth, Demonic Beast, Grand Lord, Level 139 HP 3,600,000,000, Infernal Warlord, Elemental Creature, Great Lord, Level 137 HP 1,320,000,000, Infernal Chieftain, Elemental Creature, Grand Lord, HP 3,100,000,000. Shifeng had to admit that the antimagic volcano was a sight to behold. This neutral map teemed with Great Lord-ranked monsters. Moreover, they moved in large groups of 100 or more closely positioned to each other. If one made too much of a commotion when fighting a group of monsters here, one would easily attract monsters from other areas. However, despite the high difficulty of this map, it was the perfect grinding spot for Tier 4 existences, specifically Tier 4 experts with a mana domain. Shifeng charged at the volcanic behemoth, the strongest monster in sight, without hesitation. The next moment, when Shifeng got within 300 yards of the volcanic behemoth, the Grand Lord in question noticed his presence. Immediately, the 30-meter-tall beast covered in flaming scales let loose a deafening roar. The roar instantly attracted the wandering and resting volcanic beasts, and over 3,000 volcanic beasts converged on the volcanic behemoth's location in the blink of an eye. The majority of these volcanic beasts were level 135+ lords, with some of them great lords. Even a 1,000-man team composed of Tier 3 experts of the same level would falter when faced with so many volcanic beasts. After all, not only were these monsters moving in an organized manner, but the mana their bodies radiated also showed faint signs of synchronizing, which would double the power of the fire-type spells they cast. Suddenly, thousands of fiery attacks shot into the air, heading toward Shifeng. Although the attacks were not fully synchronized with each other, the sheer number still allowed them to exhibit power at the Tier 4 standard. That was more than enough to deter any ordinary Tier 4 combatant from tanking the attacks. However, when Shifeng saw the several thousand attacks coming at him, not only did he not show the slightest sign of fear, but he even displayed excitement. The next moment, Shifeng swung his hand and began manipulating his mana body's power. Suddenly, with Shifeng as the center, a ripple spread into the surroundings. At the same time, a storm brewed in the surrounding space, causing even space to shudder. Boom, boom, boom. For a time, explosions echoed throughout the sky in rapid succession. The sky itself transformed into a sea of flames as the storm annihilated the thousands of fiery attacks. Afterward, the volcanic beasts enveloped by the storm knelt on the ground one after another. Only the Great Lord-ranked volcanic beasts remained standing. However, standing was pretty much all they could do, as even moving their bodies took grueling effort. As for the volcanic behemoth, the leader of the volcanic beasts, it didn't fare that much better than the Great Lord-ranked volcanic beasts, either. My mana domain has improved to such an extent. Shifeng was astonished when he saw the thousands of kneeling volcanic beasts and the volcanic behemoth, which had great difficulty moving his current mana domain, was actually capable of suppressing even a Grand Lord to such an extent. Despite being a strength-based demonic beast, the volcanic behemoth had barely half of its mobility left. If he used his mana domain against agility-based demonic creatures, the suppression effect would most likely be even more prominent. After a moment reveling in the improvement of his mana domain, Shifeng stopped being polite with the volcanic beasts. Immediately, he activated Blade Domain and began slaughtering the volcanic beasts with the 7 summoned magic swords. All his attacks dealt damage in the tens of millions, with critical hits causing over 100 million damage. In the case of the Lord-ranked volcanic beasts, which had only several hundred million HP, they fell after just 2 or 3 hits. In the end, it took Shifeng less than half an hour to annihilate the 3,000-plus volcanic beasts. Even the volcanic behemoth failed to escape his grasp. Since Shifeng fought monsters of a higher level, his experience bar skyrocketed after the battle ended. Of course, as he had already reached Tier 4, monsters at the Lord rank and below granted him diminished EXP, only those at the Great Lord rank and above granted him normal amounts of EXP. This could be considered one of the disadvantages of getting promoted to Tier 4. Even so, Shifeng still reached 34% of level 127 after the battle. His leveling speed was simply phenomenal. At this rate, he could easily level up twice by the end of the day. However, he wasn't the slightest bit surprised by this situation. In God's domain, after one reached Tier 4, leveling up became a very simple task. All one needed to do was search for places with a lot of monsters. Hence, in the past, Tier 4 players would complain about the lack of grinding spots in God's domain. Often, the task of searching for monsters was much more troublesome for Tier 4 players than the task of killing monsters. What was even more troublesome was collecting the monsters' loot. The time it took to collect the loot of the monsters they killed was several times longer than the time it took to kill the monsters. Sure enough, the loot collection process is much more tiresome than the grinding process. Shifeng got a headache when he saw all the loot scattered within a 1,000-yard radius of himself. At this moment, he finally understood the suffering of those Tier 4 experts in the past. However, ignoring the loot wasn't an option, either. After all, these monsters dropped considerably excellent loot. Among the items dropped were standard magic crystals, fire-attributed magic crystals, and various rare ores. The fire-attributed magic crystals were especially valuable, worth far more than the standard magic crystal. Attributed magic crystals were essential in the production of certain epic weapons and equipment. Some peak constructions also required attributed magic crystals to build. However, attributed magic crystals were incredibly rare in the modern God's domain. Hence, it would be a massive waste to simply ignore the loot. Shifeng ended up spending 2 whole hours gathering all of the items scattered across the battlefield. However, he had to admit that he had earned a huge harvest. Even if he ignored the numerous level 130 bronze, mysterious iron, secret silver, and fine gold weapons and equipment he got, just the magic crystals numbered over 4,000 already. He had also picked up over 300 fire-attributed magic crystals. Afterward, he killed several more groups of monsters in the anti-magic volcano, pushing his level from 127 to 128, the total number of magic crystals collected to beyond 30,000, and the number of fire-attributed magic crystals collected to 1,500. Be it his leveling speed or money-making speed, both exceeded the standard of ordinary Tier 4 players. Since the sky was darkening, Shifeng found a safe cave and called up his system interface. That's enough for today. With several more days grinding here, I should be able to exceed the average level of the peak experts here. By then, I shouldn't be at a disadvantage in levels when the infant dragon raid takes place. When Shifeng saw that he had already reached 19% of level 128, he found his leveling speed very satisfactory. Not to mention, he had managed to produce 7 crystals of souls through today's grind, far more than what he could produce in the modern God's domain. Afterward, Shifeng logged out of the game to rest. After all, he had already spent more than 24 hours online. Even if he was using the Fearless cabin now, staying online for long periods still wasn't wise. Once he went offline, before he could even climb out of his cabin, a message notification sounded in his cabin. The message sender was none other than Liang Jing, the person managing Zero Wing's headquarters on his behalf right now. "Guild leader, you finally decided to pick up," Liang Jing said in exasperation. "I've already brought the 2 vice guild leaders to Yuantian City as per your request. What should we do now? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You're here already?" Surprised by Liang Jing's swift action, Shifeng chuckled and said, "Okay, bring them to the upper zone's entrance now. I'll wait for you there." The upper zone's entrance. Liang Jing couldn't help growing a little excited at Shifeng's words. Okay. We'll be there in 3 hours. Shifeng burst into laughter at Liang Jing's excited expression. However, he understood her mood. After all, the upper zone was a place countless people yearned to enter. But this is a problem. I only managed to get 100 points yesterday, even after exchanging all of the credits I had. If the two of them join me, I can't even afford food for the 3 of us. It seems I'll have to convert those 5,000 units of 7 luminaries crystal now. The thought of the food prices here gave Shifeng a headache. Fortunately, he had earned a killing from mythology. Otherwise, he would have to start begging for food. Shifeng tidied himself up and hurried to the Green God Tower. Chapter 2780, Minor Character. Chapter 2780, Minor Character. Upper Zone, Base Layer. Shifeng enjoyed the scenery of the base layer as he strolled around the residential area he lived in. Contrary to his expectations, he did not see any of the paradisiacal sceneries depicted in the rumors spread in the outside world. Instead, what he saw were only high-rise buildings. The areas not occupied by high-rise buildings held facilities such as restaurants, training halls, and gyms. Moreover, compared to the outside world, almost all of the people gave the impression that they were incredibly busy, and they all had tense expressions on their faces. This could be considered natural. After all, the upper zone wasn't some kind of paradise. Instead, it was a place with far more intense competition than the outside world. From what Shifeng understood, Yuantian City's upper zone had a population of less than 300,000, nearly a quarter of which were employees of the Green God Company. As for the remaining inhabitants, the majority of them belonged to the various major corporations, and only a small portion were people who had entered the upper zone through special selections or reserved slots. Meanwhile, unlike what the general public thought, one wouldn't live a carefree life after entering the upper zone. On the contrary, one would face even greater pressure than when they lived in the outside world. The reason for this was the upper zone's ridiculously high cost of living. Just the matter of food already gave Shifeng a headache. Even the most basic meal cost 30 points, equivalent to 300,000 credits. Nobody would pay such an absurd price for food in the outside world. Yet, in the upper zone, this amount of money would buy only the most basic meal. This was still only a small problem in the upper zone. The truly troublesome aspect was the various training resources available here. Just living in the upper zone wouldn't be enough for a person to achieve longevity. One still needed to include various exercises and medicines into the equation, all of which cost a lot of points. Without sufficient wealth and resources, one couldn't live in the upper zone at all. Those born in the upper zone were allowed to live freely until the age of 12. Afterward, they had to undergo a series of tests until they reached 15. If they failed the tests, they would be banished from the upper zone. Moreover, passing the Green God Company's basic assessment would only qualify one to work at the lowest level of the Green God Company. Only if one conquered the mental path before the age of 20 or made a great contribution to the Green God Company would one gain authority and be considered an ordinary person in the upper zone. If one wished to live longer and better in the upper zone, and perhaps even gain influence and become someone respected by the major corporations, one would have to head to the middle layer. Otherwise, one would only be an ant living in the base layer. After all, the base layer's average lifespan might be 150 years, but that didn't mean every individual would live up to 150 years old. Moreover, there was also the matter of retaining one's youth and physical vitality. For residents living in the base layer, even if they could live a fulfilling life and constantly supplement themselves with the various resources available in the base layer, they could retain their youth until the age of 50, at most. Afterward, their physical fitness would decline. By the time they reached 100 years old, they would have entered old age. However, in the case of people living in the middle layer, they would still retain their youthful vitality even at the age of 80. Appearance-wise, they would look like they were just entering their 30s. In other words, the middle layer's residents got to retain their youth for nearly twice as long as the base layer's residents. And even at the age of 120, they would only be middle-aged and look like they were just entering their 40s. Who wouldn't go crazy at such a temptation? After strolling about for a while, Shifeng rode one of the upper zone's free levitating smart cars and arrived at the Green God Tower roughly 20 minutes later. At the end of the journey, he had to admit that the upper zone was truly amazing. The various transportation facilities here were completely free, and the cars were even equipped with fully intelligent navigation systems. He could travel anywhere he wished with just a word. Shifeng made his way to the Green God Tower's 7th floor, which was where all resource exchanges took place in the base layer. Everyone seeking to convert credits into trade points, exchange rare resources for trade points and contribution points, or exchange points for the various medicines the Green God Company offered would come here. Upon arriving on the 7th floor, he found that the hall, which was the size of 8 basketball courts, was crowded with thousands of people. Compared to the registration room he visited previously, this place was many times livelier. Most of the gathered people were wealthy children seeking to exchange for trade points using credits. As to why they were doing so, the reason was simple. Most, if not all, of the major corporations operating in the upper zone had existed for over a century already. After operating for such a long time, the shareholder families running these corporations had grown significantly in size. At this point, with how large the shareholder families' population had become, these families would be fortunate to put their children into the upper zone. In addition, the resources the Green God Company sought were all incredibly rare and valuable. For the sake of their own future in the upper zone, the various corporations wouldn't let the children of their shareholder families casually exchange resources for points at all. Hence, aside from the designated heir or heiress of their respective families, the other children who had entered the upper zone would have to rely on themselves to secure resources in the upper zone. However, as most of these children were not particularly talented, they naturally didn't have the means to get the necessary resources or achievements to earn themselves a lot of trade points and contribution points. They could only visit the exchange center every day to exchange for trade points using credits. As a result, despite the Green God Tower's exchange center being open 24/7, there would almost always be people lining up before the credit area's exchange counters. If news of such a scene were to reach the outside world, jaws would definitely drop. After all, every one of the wealthy children lining up in the exchange center was a prince or princess of a major corporation. Normally, they would have numerous people at their beck and call. Yet, in the exchange center, they had no choice but to behave like normal people and stand in line themselves. And even more surprisingly, none of these wealthy children in the queue was making a fuss. Unlike the credit area, there was only one exchange counter in the contribution area. Usually, almost nobody stood before this exchange counter, and anybody wishing to use its services could do so without having to wait. However, when Shifeng approached the contribution area, 2 people were already standing before the exchange counter there. Moreover, he actually recognized both of them. One of them was none other than Hanifeng, the heir of the 5 States Corporation. Out of all the corporation heirs Shifeng had met before, Hanifeng had the most exaggerated physical fitness. Hanifeng also did not behave like the typical princeling of a major corporation. The person standing behind Hanifeng was the butler Zhuolinqiu. "Young master, now that we've completed the Green God Company's assignment, I believe your total contribution points will reach 60,000 once the evaluation is complete and enter the top 10 rankings. If we factor in the corporation's decision to support you fully this time, I'm certain you'll be able to enter the top 3 in the contribution competition this time," Zhuolinqiu said excitedly. The contribution competition was held once every 3 months. The top 3 of the competition would gain the right to stay in the middle layer. Although the duration of the stay was only 3 short months, this was also one of the few ways the various corporations could gain access to the middle layer. Meanwhile, so long as Hanifeng entered the middle layer, he could acquire resources that were far superior to what was available in the base layer. At that time, his status in the upper zone would immediately skyrocket. However, Hanifeng remained indifferent to Zhuolinqiu's words. Shaking his head, he said, "While I am confident of getting into the top 5, my chances of getting into the top 3 are still slim. The people currently ranked among the top 3 have held those positions for the past 2 years. According to rumors, those 3 people are close to gaining high-grade authority. They will definitely do everything they can to retain their positions, so it won't be easy to surpass them in contributions. In fact, Despite not having put in any real effort, they have already accumulated over 100,000 contribution points. If we show signs of trying to compete for the top 3, it wouldn't be strange if their points suddenly doubled or tripled. At Hanifeng's words, Zhuo Linqiu fell silent, acknowledging that the top 3 rankers were indeed a cut above everyone else. After all, those 3 people had already monopolized the top 3 positions of the contribution competition for the past 2 years. Trying to surpass them in contributions definitely wouldn't be an easy task. While Hanifeng and Zhuo Linqiu were conversing, the staff member manning the exchange counter finished calculating Hanifeng's contribution. Sir, after including the assignment you completed this time, you now have 62,425 contribution points accumulated. You are currently ranked 7th in the contribution competition. 7th. Hanifeng did not feel particularly happy to hear that he was ranked 7th in the competition, taking the result in stride. After giving the staff member a nod, he promptly turned around to leave. The instant Hanifeng and Zhuo Linqiu turned around, they noticed Shifeng making his way to the counter. Why is he here? Zhuo Linqiu rubbed his eyes in doubt when he saw Shifeng, who was dressed in white casuals. The upper zone was a place that countless people sought to enter but couldn't. The guild leaders of many superpowers didn't have the qualifications to enter the upper zone even now. Yet, Shifeng, who was merely the guild leader of a pseudo-superpower, had actually entered it. This was simply incredible. At this time, let alone Zhuo Linqiu, even Hanifeng revealed a rare look of surprise on his face. When Hanifeng last met Shifeng, in Fenglin City's Redstone restaurant, the latter was merely an insignificant minor character in his eyes. After all, Shifeng and his subordinates simply weren't capable of reaching the playing field Hanifeng fought on. At best, he could only use Zero Wing as a pawn to hinder his opponents. Even when Zero Wing developed rapidly and became enemies with many superpowers, he still thought nothing of the guild. After all, what the various major corporations were truly competing for wasn't God's domain, but the upper zone's resources. Yet, now, a minor character like Shifeng had actually set foot into the upper zone. This situation was as unbelievable as a fairy tale. Did the Boulder Corporation give him a reserved slot? Hanifeng muttered in speculation. That should be the case. Otherwise, there's no way someone like him, with no background, can enter the upper zone, Zhuo Linqiu said, nodding in agreement. In the recent struggle for the reserve seats of God's domain's 12 great guilds, Frost Heaven had surpassed everyone's expectations and secured itself a seat, instantly becoming a true titan in God's domain. The biggest contributor to Frost Heaven's victory was undoubtedly Zero Wing. Hence, it wouldn't be strange for Frost Heaven to grant Zero Wing a few of the upper zone's reserved slots in gratitude. After thinking up to this point, Hanifeng and Zhuo Linqiu calmed down. Meanwhile, as Shifeng walked over, he merely glanced at Hanifeng and Zhuo Linqiu before continuing on his way. He did not take the initiative to say hello. After all, he wasn't exactly familiar with the two. He was also in a hurry right now. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Zhuo Linqiu's expression turned ugly at Shifeng's response. He never imagined that Shifeng would actually show so little respect to Hanifeng. The man didn't even bother saying hello and merely walked away like a stranger. Shifeng simply didn't place the Five States Corporation in his eyes. However, before Zhuo Linqiu could vent his anger, he was stunned to see Shifeng stop before the contribution area's exchange counter. What is he trying to do? Hanifeng was confused when he saw Shifeng conversing with the staff member at the counter. That's the exchange counter for the contribution area. Did he come here to exchange for trade points because there was no line here? Sure enough, he is a minor character. He only knows how to head to places where he can gain advantages. He thinks he can save time by coming here, yet he is wholly ignorant of the rules, Zhuo Linqiu sneered as he looked at Shifeng, who was still conversing with the staff, in contempt. However, no sooner had Zhuo Linqiu finished speaking than the nearby staff member suddenly exclaimed in a loud and excited tone, "Congratulations, Mr. Shah. You have gained a total of 50,000 contribution points and 5 million trade points this time. You are currently ranked 10th in the contribution competition." Chapter 2781. Times have changed. Chapter 2781. Times have changed. 50,000 contribution points. 10th place. When Zhuolinqiu heard the Green God Company's staff's words, he was dumbfounded. In fact, even Hanifeng, who possessed an apathetic personality, felt a little dazed at the staff member's words. After all, Shifeng was initially only a pawn in their eyes. Yet, not only did he climb up to the same playing field they fought on, but he was now even actively competing with them. No wonder he didn't put us in his eyes. Realization dawned upon Zhuolinqiu as he looked at Shifeng. However, a moment later, a hint of mockery appeared on his face as he said, "It's a pity he doesn't know that the contribution competition participants are just warming up and that the current rankings are only temporary." The upper zone's contribution competition had been going on for many years now, and everyone mostly understood how it worked. Those intent on participating in a particular season's competition generally wouldn't reveal their cards in the first 2 months of the season. This was because contribution points were basically trump cards for participants. Naturally, it would be best if participants hid their cards as deeply as possible and only revealed them at the last possible moment. Only then could these trump cards play a vital role. Moreover, there was an added benefit to accumulating contribution points in secret, deciding whether one would continue participating in a particular season's contribution competition or not. After all, aside from time-based assignments, other forms of contributions could be reserved for future competitions if necessary. Since the contribution competition had been running for many years now, some participants had been accumulating contribution points for a long time. These participants were waiting for the fateful day when they would reveal all their cards, instantly securing one of the top 3 positions, and gain access to the middle layer. Meanwhile, the current contribution competition was less than a month along. Hence, the various participants were still testing the waters and had yet to seriously invest their contribution points. The majority of their current points were from completing time-based assignments the Green God Company issued, not from long-term assignments that could be turned in at any time. "Although I don't know why he made such a move, this is a good opportunity for us," Hanifeng said, shaking his head as he regained his calm. "Old Zhuo, go talk to him and tell him I'll buy the remaining points he has kept hidden at double the price." "Double the price?" Zhuolinqiu looked at Hanifeng in surprise. "Young master, historically, purchasing points at 1.5 times their original value is already pretty high. After all, there is no way these people can secure one of the top 3 rankings. There's no meaning for them to hold on to their points. If other people were to find out that you're offering to purchase his hidden points at double the price, they'd most likely raise their own prices, as well." There were many instances where multiple participants joined hands to compete in the contribution competition. After all, unlike contribution points gained through completing assignments, points gained through other sources could be freely traded in secret. When a competition was about to end, participants who were close to the top 3 positions would often purchase the hidden points of other participants. Naturally, as Hanifeng was aiming for one of the top 3 positions this time, he would also participate in this practice. The exchange rate would be based on the prices of the items sold by the Green God Company. "Just do as I say." The Green God Company announced that the top 20 participants would receive a reward, so many people are trying to compete for the top 20 positions. "It is only natural for the price of contribution points this time to be higher," Hanifeng said, shaking his head. According to the information he had obtained, the Green God Company intended to further squeeze the various corporations for their wealth. To do so, the company had intensified the competition by allowing the top 20 participants to exchange for a limited number of items exclusive to the middle layer. Once this information spread, the price of contribution points would definitely increase. However, while a price hike was inevitable, the increase wouldn't be exaggerated, either. After all, there were only so many items the top 20 participants could exchange using contribution points. Beyond that purchase limit, whatever contribution points they had remaining would become useless. "I understand." Zhuolinqiu nodded and walked toward Shifeng. On the other side, Shifeng was currently ecstatic. Just a second ago, he had still been a poor bastard in the upper zone. Now, however, he had 5 million trade points to his name, enough to purchase 5 ordinary housing units in the base layer. Of course, these points were still insufficient to purchase a large villa in the base layer. However, they were definitely more than adequate for his daily expenditure. At the very least, even after welcoming gentle snow and aqua rose into the upper zone, he wouldn't have to worry about their necessities. However, it's going to be difficult to get another large influx of points. It seems I'll have to think of a long-term way to secure 7 luminaries crystals in bulk, Shifeng thought with a sigh. 5,000 units of 7 luminaries crystal was a significant amount, yet it was only enough to get him 5 million trade points and 50,000 contribution points. With just this many trade points and contribution points, let alone catching up with the top 3 rankers of the competition, he probably couldn't afford anything from the middle layer. However, for his present self, obtaining more 7 luminaries crystals wasn't much of a challenge. After all, he was currently in the ancient god's domain. The resources available in the ancient era were far more abundant than in the modern era. After verifying on his quantum watch that he had received the 5 million trade points and 50,000 contribution points, Shifeng planned to head for the upper zone's entrance to receive gentle snow and aqua rose. After all, this was the first time they were visiting the upper zone. Without anyone to guide them, it was very easy for problems to occur. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. There were many taboos in the upper zone. If they accidentally violated one of these taboos, there was a high chance they would be banished from the upper zone permanently. However, before Shifeng could leave the exchange counter, Zhuolinqiu appeared beside him. Guild leader Shu, we meet again. Although Zhuolinqiu felt displeased at Shifeng's earlier attitude, as Hanifeng's butler, he still greeted Shifeng politely. Master Zhuo, do you have business with me? Shifeng asked calmly as he looked at Zhuolinqiu. Inwardly, though, Shifeng was a little surprised by this situation. Although he had expected Hanifeng to seek him out sooner or later, he never thought that the man would act so quickly. Kurue had informed him about the ins and outs of the contribution competition, so he knew that those competing for the top 3 spots would secretly purchase contribution points from other participants. Now that he had just exchanged for 50,000 contribution points in one fell swoop, those seeking the top 3 spots couldn't ignore his existence. Indeed, I do. Moreover, this is great news for you, Guild leader Shu, Zhuolinqiu said with a faint smile. I believe you know about the matters regarding the contribution competition already, so I'll get straight to the point. Young Master Han wishes to purchase the contribution points you have yet to turn in. Moreover, young Master Han is willing to purchase them at double their market value. May I know what you think of this, Guild leader Shu? Chapter 2782, Wealthy Shifeng. Chapter 2782, Wealthy Shifeng double the market value? Shifeng was a little surprised when he heard Zhuolinqiu's words. According to Kurue, the transaction price for contribution points would reach 1.5 times the market value at most. Moreover, that was when the contribution competition was incredibly intense. After all, unless one entered the middle layer, it didn't matter how many contribution points one managed to accumulate. Yet, Hanifeng was offering double the market value. Even if the Green God Company would allow the top 20 participants to exchange for 3 items from the middle layer this time, this was still a very high price. After all, the difficulty of getting into the top 3 was simply too great. Before Shifeng looked into the current top 3 participants, he had still been confident of getting into the top 3. However, after gaining an understanding of those 3 participants, all thoughts of entering the top 3 had disappeared from his mind. This was because those 3 people could instantly gain an additional 1 million contribution points if they grew serious. In other words, if he wished to secure one of the top 3 positions, he would need 100,000 units of 7 luminaries crystal at the very minimum. What did this amount represent? Even if he squeezed the 5 great superguilds and a dozen other superpowers dry, getting such a huge number of 7 luminaries crystals was impossible. Moreover, this was only the minimum requirement to compete for the top 3 positions. Hence, he had no choice but to wait for Zero Wing to grow stronger and set aside trying for one of the top 3 spots for the future. In the current competition, he simply had no chance whatsoever. Even if he was currently in the ancient god's domain, with its more abundant resources, the 7 luminaries crystal was still an incomparably valuable commodity. Moreover, its rarity was not the slightest bit lower than in the modern era. In fact, competition for the 7 luminaries crystal was intenser in the ancient era. From what he heard, the interstellar continent's various powers were similarly purchasing 7 luminaries crystals at astronomical prices. Residents of the interstellar continent could exchange for living resources in the real world using 7 luminaries crystals. In fact, if one collected a sufficient number of 7 luminaries crystals, one could even get promoted from an ordinary civilian to a resident of the core area. Simply put, every player in the ancient era was competing for 7 luminaries crystals. On the other hand, only the major corporations based in upper zones were competing for 7 luminaries crystals in the modern god's domain. The competition over the crystals had nothing to do with ordinary players. In fact, it didn't even have anything to do with ordinary corporations. Hence, even if he were to contest frantically for 7 luminaries crystals in the ancient era, the amount he could get his hands on was unlikely to secure him one of the top 3 spots in the current contribution competition. Now, he would be satisfied so long as he could secure one of the top 20 positions, and he could indeed afford to sell a portion of his additional points. That's right. Double the market value. Guild leader Shi, you should be able to see young Master Han's sincerity in this matter, Zhuolinqiu said, chuckling. I can assure you that you won't find another person in the base layer who would offer you such a price. The 5 States Corporation was one of the top corporations in the country. It had deeper foundations than even the Boulder Corporation, albeit by only a slight margin. In addition, the corporation even had a genius like Hanifeng as its heir. It was only a matter of time before the corporation set foot in the middle layer. After giving the matter some thought, Shifeng replied, I can agree to that price, but I have a condition. Hanifeng's offer would tempt anyone. After all, this was equivalent to receiving a 50% discount on the various products the Green God Company put up for exchange. For Shifeng, who was currently severely lacking in the upper zone's resources, Hanifeng's offer was heaven sent. Condition? What condition? Zhuolinqiu frowned slightly. In his opinion, the price Hanifeng offered was already quite generous. He never thought that Shifeng would want a foot after getting an inch. I want to settle the transaction using life potions, phantom potions, or the middle layer's limited products, Shifeng said. I will not accept anything else, apart from these items. 5 million trade points were already more than enough for him to get by in the base layer. There was no point in getting more. Only the limited exchange items were of value to him. Particularly, the life potion and the phantom potion weren't available in the outside world. Even if he tried to exchange for these items using his authority, he could get only 5 bottles per year. This amount wasn't even enough for his own use, much less sharing it with other people. This condition is too much. You should know that those items can't be bought even with a large number of trade points and contribution point. Zhuolinqiu flatly refused Shifeng's condition. Nobody in the entire base layer would satisfy this condition of yours. Whether it was the life potion, the phantom potion, or the middle layer's limited items, they were all incredibly precious to the various corporations. No one would casually trade them away. How about I buy them at their original price? Shifeng suggested. Shifeng understood that he was indeed asking for a lot with his condition. However, this was also how negotiations worked. Only after both sides agreed on a price could a transaction take place. Zhuolinqiu fell speechless at Shifeng's response. He felt that Shifeng didn't understand his previous words at all. However, before Zhuolinqiu could manage a response, Hanifeng's holographic projection suddenly appeared from Zhuolinqiu's quantum watch. It is impossible for me to sell those items at base price. However, with my authority, I can sell some to you at double the price. This is also the lowest I can go, Hanifeng said. Moreover, I believe that nobody else in the base layer would offer you a better price. That works. Shifeng didn't feel particularly surprised at Hanifeng's counter-offer. On the contrary, he found this outcome to be quite excellent already. The limited items the Green God Company offered for exchange came with fixed price tags, and residents with the necessary authority could exchange for these items at any time. However, as their description suggested, each resident could exchange for only a limited number of these items. If a person wanted to get their hands on more, they could purchase these items from other residents at a marked-up price. Moreover, even if one were willing to pay the extra cost, one wouldn't necessarily be able to find a willing seller. That settles it, then. Han Ifeng nodded. However, let me get one thing straight first. Every transaction we conduct must be valued at 50,000 contribution points or more. Otherwise, our transaction will be invalid. That won't be a problem, Shifeng assured, smiling. He understood what was going through Han Ifeng's mind. A sum of several thousand contribution points was most likely nothing in Han Ifeng's eyes. Moreover, such an amount wouldn't be of any help to him in the contribution competition. After all, if the top 3 participants were serious, they could easily add 1,000,000 points to their names. Hence, a transaction of 50,000 contribution points was most likely the lowest acceptable amount for Han Ifeng. Okay. So long as you've collected 50,000 contribution points, you can come and find me at any time, Han Ifeng said before disconnecting the quantum communication. After Han Ifeng finished speaking, Zhuo Linqiu turned around and walked away, leaving Shifeng alone at the exchange counter. When Zhuo Linqiu returned to Han Ifeng's side, he had a hesitant expression. Just speak your mind, Han Ifeng said as he looked at his old butler. Young master, I'm afraid the old master and the others will have big opinions about your decision to sell him those items at just double the price, Zhuo Linqiu said worriedly. After all, those items are things the corporation went to great lengths to accumulate. They are meant to serve as the foundation for the family's younger generations. Foundation? Han Ifeng suddenly smiled. Unless we enter the middle layer, the 5 states corporation will be nothing but ants in the eyes of those above. Also, we have failed to enter the middle layer after all these years. If we don't fight now, when will we fight? Moreover, the family has already promised to assist me with everything they have. If they're not even willing to part with these items, how are we supposed to compete with the other participants? However, just Shifeng's 50,000 contribution points won't change anything, Zhuo Linqiu said. I naturally know this. Shifeng is only one of the small sources for me to secure contribution points. At this point, Han Ifeng's eyes began glowing slightly. The old man has already met with the other corporations in the upper zone and made some promises to them. I believe he should have no problems securing 700,000 or 800,000 contribution points for me. Afterward, it'll depend on whether I can complete the Green God Company's bounty. So long as I succeed, I am certain I can enter the top 3. He was hell-bent on winning the contribution competition this time. Meanwhile, after Han Ifeng and Zhuo Linqiu left the exchange center, Shifeng made his way to the item exchange counter. Compared to the contribution points counter, the item exchange counter had many more people lined up before it. After waiting in line for around 15 minutes, Shifeng exchanged for 5 phantom potions and 5 life potions, as well as 5 strengthening potions, which cost the same as the phantom potions and life potions. In the end, he spent a total of 75,000 trade points. In the outside world, that was already equivalent to 750 million credits. The strengthening potion was considered the least promising product in the upper zone because it had only one function, the strengthening of the user's physical fitness. However, residents in the upper zone would have their physical fitness automatically raised to a certain level, even without any training. If one combined this effect with daily exercise, they could elevate their physical fitness to astonishing levels. Hence, there was simply no need to spend 5,000 trade points to exchange for a strengthening potion. Nevertheless, Shifeng naturally believed it was better for him to raise his physical fitness as quickly as possible. After all, the stronger his physical fitness became, the easier it would be to improve his brain activity. Often, when Shifeng gained enlightenment and achieved a qualitative improvement in his techniques, he would find himself facing various problems stemming from his inadequate physical fitness. Had he been as fit as Han Ifeng during those times, he wouldn't have faced any problems at all. Hence, he felt that it wasn't a loss to spend 25,000 trade points for 5 strengthening potions. Not to mention, he could already be considered a wealthy person in the base layer. It's almost time to pick up Qingxue and Aqua. After taking a look at the time, Shifeng promptly departed the Green God Tower and hurried over to the upper zone's entrance. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU 2 hours later, a levitating car stopped at a designated parking lot before the gigantic metal door serving as the upper zone's entrance. 4 people, 1 man and 3 women then alighted from the car. They were none other than Lei Bao, Liang Jing, Bai Qingxue, and Aqua Rose. As to why Lei Bao had come along, it was as a precaution. After all, many powers were currently targeting Zero Wing. Meanwhile, Liang Jing, someone with little combat power, was unsuited for going out alone. Hence, Lei Bao would usually accompany her whenever she left Zero Wing's headquarters. Ordinary bodyguards would have little to no use against the opponents Zero Wing faced. So, this is the upper zone. Liang Jing was surprised when she saw the vast steel wall at the upper zone's entry. Even Lei Bao was surprised by the sight. He never thought that the rumored upper zone would have such an appearance. Chapter 2783, Era of Hegemony. Chapter 2783, Era of Hegemony. Upper Zone, Entrance. While Liang Jing and Lei Bao were shocked by the sight before them, Shifeng, who had been waiting quietly by the entrance for some time, approached them. "How is it? It's different from what you imagined, right?" Shifeng asked, smiling faintly as he looked at the two. Their expressions and thoughts were exactly the same as his when he first arrived before the upper zone. "Guild leader, how is the upper zone?" Liang Jing asked as she looked at Shifeng. "Is it as amazing as the rumors make it out to be?" There were many rumors circulating in the outside world about the upper zones. Nobody was allowed to go near the upper zones without permission despite them being in the middle of bustling cities. Hence, while everyone knew of the upper zone's existence, no outsider truly understood them. In fact, there was not the smallest piece of official news on the upper zone in the world. The information everyone knew came only from rumors. Lei Bao couldn't help pricking up his ears at Liang Jing's question. To him, the upper zone was a place he never even dared to dream of visiting. After all, even world champions in fighting couldn't visit it. "It's amazing," Shifeng replied with a smile. "It's even more amazing than the rumors make it out to be. The people inside can constantly grow stronger physically without doing any training. So, is it true that even world champion level fighters are not a big deal in the upper zone?" Lei Bao asked when he heard Shifeng's words. The fact that a place could automatically improve a person's physical fitness was simply unbelievable. This revelation thoroughly shattered his view of physical training. "That rumor is slightly exaggerated, but it's not far off from the truth, either," Shifeng replied, not trying to conceal the truth. Even without physical training, the upper zone's residents can still achieve a physical fitness rivaling Honglian masters. With some systematic training, their physical fitness becomes even more astonishing. "It's actually such an amazing place." Lei Bao was shocked. He had undergone plenty of intense training to achieve his current physical fitness, yet the upper zone's residents could easily accomplish a similar feat without any training. Who would possibly believe this? However, Lei Bao knew that Shifeng wouldn't lie to him, so this inflicted an even greater shock. All of a sudden, Lei Bao felt as if he had lived his life for nothing. He felt as if all his previous efforts were nothing but a joke. "Master Lei Bao, no need to be discouraged." Looking at Lei Bao, who suddenly grew disheartened, Shifeng said, "Zero Wing will also develop in the upper zone in the future. At that time, it won't be just Qingxue, Aqua, and myself who can enter this place. I will let many more people join us. Just like those international corporations, we will treat the upper zone as our headquarters." Although Shifeng did not speak loudly, both Lei Bao and Liang Jing gasped involuntarily at his words. At the same time, a hint of anticipation and excitement flashed in their eyes. If anyone else had made this statement, they would have most likely treated it as a joke. However, Shifeng was someone who constantly worked miracles, having single-handedly developed Zero Wing to its current scale. Moreover, he never did anything he was not confident of succeeding in. His declaration meant that he had some way to achieve this goal. Zero Wing will also develop in the upper zone in the future. Liang Jing couldn't help growing excited when she looked at the distant steel wall. If Zero Wing really accomplished this feat, it would truly become a powerful existence. At that time, even ordinary superpowers would be a joke to the guild. Lei Bao clenched his fists in excitement and anticipation. He felt that his decision to join Zero Wing was the wisest choice he had made in his life. These 3 bottles here are strengthening potions. Liang Jing, take 2 back and give them to Fire and Violet, Shifeng said as he took out 3 strengthening potions and handed 2 to Liang Jing. He then turned to Lei Bao and said, Master Lei Bao, you take 1, as well. I believe that you should be able to go a step further with this strengthening potion. Fire Dance and Violet Cloud normally trained their physical bodies very seriously. The 2 of them also possessed incredible talent in this regard. Unfortunately, due to insufficient resources, their improvements had been gradual. With the strengthening potions assistance, their development would no longer be hindered. As for Lei Bao, he also possessed excellent talent. Unfortunately, as he had always been a lone wolf, he never managed to get his hands on any resources and could only rely on hard work. However, he had reached the point where he couldn't improve further through hard work alone. Although Shifeng had previously given Lei Bao several bottles of S-rank nutrient fluids, which allowed him to improve his physical fitness significantly, it was evident that S-rank nutrient fluids alone couldn't fully bring out Lei Bao's potential. However, with the strengthening potion, Lei Bao might be able to go a step further and become a half-step Honglian Grandmaster. Meanwhile, if Lei Bao succeeded, then Zero Wing would gain an additional layer of protection. Thank you, Guild Leader. I won't disappoint you. Lei Bao's eyes shone with gratitude as he looked at Shifeng. He had heard of the strengthening potion before. This thing was basically treated as a divine item in the fighting industry. Just 1 bottle could allow a person's physical fitness to undergo a qualitative transformation. Unfortunately, the medicine was incredibly rare, much rarer than even the life potion. According to rumors, even Grandmaster martial artists had difficulty getting their hands on a bottle. In fact, some Grandmasters would even put their lives on the line just to get their hands on it. Yet Shifeng not only took out 3 bottles but even gave him 1. How could Lei Bao not grow excited in this situation? With this strengthening potion, he was confident that even if he couldn't become a Honglian Grandmaster, he could, at least, reach a level where he could contend with neutralizing Grandmasters. By the way, Guild Leader, more and more NPCs are appearing in God's domain. As a result, some superpowers have designs on the Secret Covenant Tower. In fact, they've already clashed with us over a dozen times outside Sky Spring City. Currently, both sides have lost over 1,000 Tier 3 players, Liang Jing said suddenly. Fortunately, Vice Guild Leader Illusory Words and Vice Guild Leader Unyielding Heart returned in time to preside over the situation. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. However, the 2 of them believe that if this situation continues, their 2 guilds are unlikely to hold back the various superpowers for very long. Moreover, some small guilds have already begun disbanding due to the NPC population pressure. Many new NPC forces have also emerged in the various NPC cities, and these NPC forces are constantly harassing the local guilds and pose a headache even for the various superpowers. Hence, the various superpowers are all trying to enter the Secret Covenant Tower, which doesn't have NPC intervention. Moreover, I'm afraid that they will only grow more desperate as the NPC forces scale up their harassment. Shifeng frowned upon hearing Liang Jing's report on God's domains and the Secret Covenant Tower's present situation. He hadn't anticipated that the NPC forces would actually begin taking action so soon. Moreover, with the NPC forces now taking action, the main continent of God's domain would enter an era where hundreds of countries fought for hegemony. To survive the upcoming chaos, the various superpowers would probably do everything they could to secure the sacred leveling ground known as the Secret Covenant Tower. I understand. After giving the matter some thought, Shifeng looked at Liang Jing and instructed, for now, have everyone in the guild avoid going out to do quests if possible instead, have them focus on grinding in the Secret Covenant Tower and restrict their sphere of activity to Sky Spring City and our 3 guild cities. Also, have Crimson Emperor and Unyielding Soul hasten their exploration. It doesn't matter even if it increases the chances of the secret getting out. Our side will do the same as well. Originally, he thought that it would take the NPC forces another 2 weeks to take action. However, contrary to his expectations, The NPC forces had evidently completed their investigations already and made a move. Once begun, the NPC forces' harassment would only escalate as time passed. It wouldn't be long before members of player forces would get attacked if they left the confines of towns and cities. Given enough time, NPC forces would even start launching attacks on guild towns and cities, forcing the various guilds to abandon their guild towns and cities. This, in turn, would cripple the guild's income and force them to disband. Okay. I'll contact them once I return. Liang Jing nodded. Shi Feng gave Liang Jing a few more instructions, such as secretly collecting the basic materials needed to construct the small mobile fortress, then brought gentle snow and aqua rose into the upper zone. As for Liang Jing and Lei Bao, after looking at the three of them enviously for a moment, they promptly left in the levitating car. In the upper zone, gentle snow and aqua rose's condition immediately saw slight improvements. Now, they no longer looked as cold and indifferent as before. The degree of mental deterioration they suffered also declined significantly. After they consumed the luxury set meals, which Shi Feng bought for 300 trade points each, their mental states even showed signs of stabilizing. They also no longer appeared indifferent to everything around them. At the very least, they display some interest in the upper zone's matters. Occasionally, they even took the initiative to say a few words. Seeing the two's condition stabilizing, Shi Feng breathed out a sigh of relief. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The environment here should sustain the two of them for a long time. The next step is to figure out a way to consolidate my standing within the top 20. After seeing Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose enter their respective fearless cabins, Shi Feng started planning how to earn 7 Luminaries crystals in God's domain. Although he was currently ranked 10th in the contribution competition, the other participants had yet to take things seriously. Meanwhile, the competition's top 20 participants being able to exchange for 3 items from the middle layer presented a huge opportunity for the various corporations. They would definitely do everything they could to enter the top 20. If he wished to secure his position within the top 20, he would need 200,000 contribution points, at the very least, and possibly more if the competition was intense. After all, the various corporations had been operating in the upper zone for a long time now. The wealth they had accumulated wasn't something he could hope to rival. In other words, he was still short of 15,000 units of 7 Luminaries crystals right now. This was an astronomical number, even for the 5 great super guilds. Afterward, Shi Feng drank a strengthening potion and life potion before lying down in the fearless cabin in his bedroom. Login. Chapter 2784, Tier 4 Upper Rank. Chapter 2784, Tier 4 Upper Rank Antimagic Mountain Range, Deep Valley. At the Antimagic Mountain Range's core area, the mana was scorching hot. Individuals without 300 points in fire resistance would instantly die upon entering Deep Valley. In addition, plenty of level 140 Great Lord ranked monsters occupied this place. Due to the environment, native Lord ranked monsters could exert power on the level of Great Lords, while Great Lord ranked monsters could exhibit combat power at the standard of Grand Lords. Let alone players, even Tier 4 NPCs of the same level wouldn't dare come here. However, a black shadow was currently flying through the flame-filled magma valley with over 100 Great Lord-ranked magma colossi on its tail. All of these magma colossi were over 10 meters tall. When over a century of them ran together, their footsteps shook the valley. The commotion continuously attracted Lord-ranked monsters to join in the chase. Magma Colossus, Elemental Creature, Great Lord, Level 140 HP 1,950,000,000. It seems this is the most I can attract in this area. After a glance at the Magma Colossi and Magma Golems chasing after him, Shi Feng began chanting an incantation in midair. He had spent over a dozen minutes luring Magma Colossi. Despite his efforts, the group grew to just a little more than 100. Even the number of Lord-ranked Magma Golems only hovered around 3,000. When he tried luring more, some of the ones chasing after him would lose interest and return to their original locations. It was evident that the main god system did not want to allow Tier 4 players to slaughter these low-intellect elemental creatures freely. Hence, the system had granted them the instinct to remain in their respective territories. Meanwhile, as the magma colossi were about to get close enough to attack Shifeng, he completed the incantation for Flame Domain and released it. Originally, Flame Domain was only an AoE offensive spell. Its range and power weren't comparable to large-scale destruction spells. Even so, it still possessed incredible power. However, Shifeng's mana domain, mana quality, and the environment here had buffed Flame Domain to the point where it rivaled Tier 4 large-scale destruction spells. Even though the magma colossi and magma golems possessed high elemental resistance as elemental creatures, in front of absolute power, their HPs still fell rapidly. The monsters lost over 16 million HP every second. Moreover, the damage even increased by 20% every second. By the time Flame Domain's 7-second duration ended, the magma golems were already in tatters. They had clearly fallen into a heavily injured state. The magma colossi, though, fared much better, as they had lost only around 100 million HP and nothing else. If only I had a great wizard here. Just one Tier 4 curse would be enough to deal with the Lord-ranked rabble. Afterward, all I would have to do is focus on dealing with the great lords. Shifeng felt a little frustrated as he looked at the heavily injured magma golems. He had been grinding for 6 consecutive days now, and he had basically wiped out the monsters in the Antimagic mountain range's outer and inner areas. Now, he was left with only the monsters in the core area to grind for EXP. However, the majority of the monsters here were only at the Lord rank, and they awarded him with barely any EXP when killed. Moreover, they took the most time to kill due to their numbers. Fortunately, he had quite a few AoE skills at his disposal. The 7 Luminaries Rings Flame Domain was especially helpful. Without these skills, he would have collapsed from exhaustion just dealing with the Lord-ranked magma golems. The next moment, after casting Flame Domain, Shifeng followed up with Lightning Edge. This Lightning Edge was completely different from the Lightning Edge he had used in the past. When he executed the skill now, it looked as if he had summoned a raging river in the sky, one that covered 200 yards. When the raging river flowed across the crowd of monsters, the weakened magma golems were instantly killed. The power of the skill was not the slightest bit weaker than that of Tier 4 skills. Lightning Edge was capable of exhibiting such power now because Shifeng had already upgraded it to the limits of Tier 3. The skill's current power was worlds apart from when it was still at Tier 1 and Tier 2. Of course, the amount of EXP Shifeng had to invest in the skill was astronomical. This was also why, despite having grinded for 6 consecutive days, Shifeng had only reached 53% of level 138. Otherwise, he would have long since shot past level 140. However, Shifeng didn't really care about losing so many levels. After reaching Tier 4, levels were no longer that important to players. For Tier 4 players, reaching level 150 or even level 200 was a simple task. After all, they could earn EXP many times faster than Tier 3 players. In front of a Tier 4 player, Great Lord-ranked monsters that Tier 3 players had difficulty dealing with were no different from common monsters. They merely had more HP and took more time to kill. Despite this being the case, during Shifeng's previous life, one would often see Tier 4 players stuck at around level 130, even though Tier 3 players had reached level 145 already. The reason for this was simple. After reaching Tier 4, players would no longer gain significant improvements by relying on epic weapons and equipment. Only fragmented legendary weapons and equipment could help. Meanwhile, apart from obtaining fragmented legendary items, one other way Tier 4 players could improve their combat power by a large margin was through Tier 4 skills and spells. Hence, after reaching Tier 4, anyone with brains would search for Tier 4 skill and spell books. This was especially true for Tier 4 magical classes. A Tier 4 spellbook was more valuable than several pieces of top-tier epic weapons and equipment. Of course, due to the rarity of Tier 4 skill and spellbooks, not all Tier 4 players would be lucky enough to invest their EXP into nurturing their skills to Tier 4. Instead, most Tier 4 players would have to spend legacy skill points to learn Tier 4 legacy skills. Such players would be fortunate to have 3 or 4 Tier 4 skills in their arsenal. This was also why most independent players who reached Tier 4 would possess high levels, while the various large guilds' Tier 4 experts would have low levels. After all, The search for Tier 4 skillbooks required a lot of manpower. They were not items that could be found easily by relying on one person's strength. Lightning Edge was a Tier 4 skill Shifeng had obtained from the Titan Library. Previously, when he was still at Tier 3, he couldn't gain EXP rapidly. Hence, he had always left the skill at Tier 2. Now that he had reached Tier 4, he naturally couldn't continue wasting the skill's potential. After all, the Titan Library was a place players could enter only 3 times in their entire lifetimes. In other words, players could obtain 3 skill books, at most, from there. Most of the players that had visited the Titan Library had left with Tier 4 skill books because the Tier 5 and Tier 6 skill books were not things ordinary people could obtain. Even now, Shifeng was not confident he could get his hands on a Tier 5 skill book. After all, the higher a player's tier was, the more challenging the trial they would face inside the Titan Library. Back then, he had managed to reach the library's central area because he was only at Tier 2. If he had visited the Titan Library when he was at Tier 3, he might not have reached the central area. Needless to say, now that he was at Tier 4, his chances of success were even lower. Hence, unless he spent his legacy skill points, he wouldn't be able to learn new Tier 4 skills for the foreseeable future. This fact remained true even though he was currently in the ancient god's domain. Even during the ancient era, Tier 4 skill books were not common goods. Following this, Shifeng spent around 20 minutes finishing off the remaining magma colossi. After he defeated all of the monsters chasing him, his experience bar had gone up from 53% to 66%. Unfortunately, while these monsters awarded a lot of EXP, it would be some time before they would respawn. Apart from the generous EXP, the core area's monsters also awarded much more lucrative loot. Just killing this group of monsters netted Shifeng over 500 fire-attributed magic crystals, 4,000 ordinary magic crystals, and plenty of epic materials. As for the rest of the items the monsters dropped, Shifeng simply chucked them into his bag without checking. After all, it would take him a lot of time to inspect and organize all of the loot. To earn as much EXP as possible, he decided to ignore the items for now and have other people help him inspect the loot after he returned. As he had to admit that the benefits of reaching Tier 4 and grinding in high-level maps ahead of others were truly wonderful, especially in the ancient god's domain. Not only did he not have to worry about competition, but he could also earn resources by the truckload. Since he started grinding in the Antimagic mountain range until now, he had collected over 350,000 standard magic crystals and 43,000 fire-attributed magic crystals. Subsequently, Shifeng continued clearing out close to half of the magma colossi in the core area. His level had finally reached level 139 as a result. This was a level that even the ancient era's Tier 3 experts wouldn't dream of reaching at this point. With this much EXP, I should be able to upgrade Lightning Edge to Tier 4. After looking at Lightning Edge's skill window, Shifeng promptly chose to upgrade it to Tier 4. Shifeng's level dropped from 139 to 136. The skill had instantly devoured 3 levels worth of EXP. What a gluttonous fellow. Thank goodness I leveled up to 139 beforehand. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be at the average level of Tier 4 players right now. Shifeng smiled bitterly as he looked at his own level. If he hadn't leveled up to level 139, Lightning Edge's upgrade would have taken at least 4 levels worth of EXP, dropping him to level 135 or lower. However, the benefits he gained were correspondingly massive. With Lightning Edge at Tier 4, the skill would finally blossom and reveal its true power. Lightning Edge, Action Type, Tier 4 Upper Rank. When skill completion rate reaches 120%, the skill can exhibit power at the Tier 4 peak rank. Channeling Time, 0. 2 seconds deals 1200% physical and 1500% lightning damage in a cone in front of the user. Initial coverage range is 500 yards. Duration, 7 seconds cooldown, 10 minutes amazing, as expected of a Tier 4 skill from the Titan Library. Shifeng was astonished when he read Lightning Edge's detailed introduction. It can already exhibit power at the Tier 4 upper rank standard even in its normal state. If I can execute it at 120% completion rate, combined with the skill's range, it is practically comparable to a Tier 4 taboo skill. As a swordsman, most of his skills were single-targeted, a huge limitation when fighting large numbers of monsters. However, Lightning Edge could now make up for this weakness. The only downside was the skill's relatively long cooldown. Even so, it would be more than enough to inflict heavy injuries on monsters and mythic bosses. Just as Shifeng was planning to continue grinding for levels, he suddenly received a message alert. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The sender of the message was Solitary 9, and the message's content was simple: everyone has left their respective legacy lands already. That's quick of them. Shifeng smiled when he saw Solitary 9's message. Now that I've resolved the problem of my deficient skills and level, it's time to head back. He activated the 7 Luminaries Ring's space movement, teleporting toward Meteorite City. As return scrolls did not exist in the ancient god's domain, players had to rely on their own 2 feet to travel to NPC towns and cities, which was a great inconvenience. If not for him having reached Tier 4, which granted him the ability to fly freely, and the omnipotent 7 Luminaries Ring, returning to Meteorite City would take ages. However, perhaps that was why the Ancient Era's players did not surpass the Modern Era's players by too much in terms of levels, despite the Ancient Era's advantages over the Modern Era. 20 minutes later, Shifeng arrived before Meteorite City's entrance. Just like before, he could still see a ton of people coming and going. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.